All right. Hello and welcome. We want to invite you all to our February webinar here at Centralina, Diet, Inflammation, and the Gut Microbiome. We're so happy to have you here, and we know it's going to be a great one. We're also interested. And before we get started, though, I wanted to go over some of our Zoom webinar features. If you've not been in one of our webinars before, you will only be seeing the slides, not each other. You will also be automatically muted. And you'll just be seeing, in addition to the slides, the speaker and the host. I am one of the hosts, and Caitlin McElrath is our other host. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. Everything's being recorded, and if you have to leave, we hope you don't, but if you were to have to leave, you can check out the full recording later at www.centralinaaging.org under resources. All right, so now we're going to get straight to it. I am so happy to introduce today's speaker, Tracy Bonofski, and to welcome Tracy to our webinar. She will be presenting today on diet, inflammation, and the gut microbiome. Tracy Bonofski has been a full-time faculty member in the Department of Kinesiology at UNC Charlotte since 2007. She teaches courses in nutrition, exercise science, and serves as an internship coordinator, academic advisor, and coordinator of the Health Connections learning community. Originally from upstate New York, Tracy earned a BS in nutritional science from Cornell University and her master's in health and exercise science from the Wake Forest University here in North Carolina. Tracy is a registered dietitian, certified dietitian in sports nutrition, clinical exercise physiologist, and she holds a certificate from Cornell University in whole foods, plant-based nutrition. And if not, that's not enough for you. Prior to working at UNC Charlotte, Tracy was a dietitian for NASCAR and also spent several years working as a cardiac rehabilitation. So with that wonderful resume, I'd like to introduce the wonderful Tracy Bonofski. Tracy?
Thank you, Margaret. I'm just sharing my screen. Sorry, it gave me a little message I had to read real quick, but it was fine. Okay, here we go. So thank you so much to everybody who is here today. And just give me 1 second so I can move everything out of the way while I click away here. Okay, start slideshow. Here we go. Okay. So thank you, Margaret. You made me sound a lot more important than I really am. But yes, I've been teaching at UNC Charlotte full-time since 2007. And I'm actually in the Department of Applied Physiology, Health, and Clinical Sciences, which just of a few weeks ago is called the Department of Kinesiology. But for some reason, they thought the term kinesiology was too confusing. So we changed it to something even more confusing. But anyway, it is what it is. And I love working at UNC Charlotte. And I appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you all this afternoon. So we're going to move forward with today's topic, which, as you can see, is going to focus on how our diet interacts with inflammation, chronic disease, and also talk a lot about the gut microbiome, which is basically the bacteria that lives in our gut and how that might affect overall health. Margaret already did this part, so I'm going to skip right over this. You've heard all about me, and we don't need to be bored about that. So next up is our outline for today. We are going to discuss the topics that you can see listed here on the slide, mainly covering two main topics: gut microbiome and inflammation. The reason why we're discussing both is that they tend to overlap one another in terms of diet and the recommendations. So for example, some of the foods that I'll talk to you about today that would benefit you in terms of inflammation and your overall health also would be the same kinds of foods that would beneficially impact the microbiome of your digestive tract. So I think you'll see a good connection between the topics. And then as we move along, I think Caitlin or Margaret will kind of keep an eye on the chat box. So if you do have any questions, I'll try to stop periodically and answer those as we go along. So let's start off today with inflammation. We'll discuss a little bit about inflammation, what it means, how it affects our health, and how our diet can impact the inflammation in our body. And once we've finished that topic, we'll kind of transition over to the gut microbiome. So as you're probably well aware, there's different types of inflammation. We could discuss acute inflammation. An example of that might be if you cut your finger and you see some redness or you have some pain, and then over time it quickly heals. That's your body's inflammatory response to acute inflammation. It's rather quick and sudden, and that's what we mean by acute versus chronic inflammation, which is more or less the type of inflammation that we'll be focusing on this afternoon. Chronic inflammation is when you have something that's causing an inflammatory response within the body, but it's not necessarily true inflammation that we may think of as in, hurting ourselves, cutting our finger. It's more silent in nature. So for example, we all have some sort of inflammation going on within our bodies right now, but we don't necessarily feel it, see it, or are aware of it. And so what we're trying to do is decrease the amount of inflammation that's taking place within our body, because studies have shown the more inflammation that you have going on within your vessels, your bloodstream, your tissues, the higher risk you're going to have for many different chronic diseases. So an example of chronic inflammation might be high blood pressure. It's silent. You may not necessarily know that you have elevated blood pressure, but that high blood pressure is exerting a force against your arteries and your vessel walls. Your vessel walls aren't really built to withstand a high pressure, and over time it can cause inflammation, and that can further lead to stroke, heart disease, etc. Another example might be high blood sugar. Again, many people don't realize that they're walking around each and every day with elevated blood sugars. And so that high blood sugar can cause inflammation and put that person at higher risk for type 2 diabetes or heart disease. So you may be wondering, what can we do to decrease the amount of inflammation in our bodies, and what are some of the causes? So as you can see from this picture, I thought it was kind of a drastic picture, or it kind of got the point across very quickly, that diet is what we're going to focus on today. And although there are other causes such as stress, genetics, pollution, all of that, we're going to focus our efforts on nutrition because that's my niche. But I'm sure you could have somebody else speak to how stress would increase inflammation or how genetics would increase inflammation. As you're probably aware, the standard American diet, otherwise known as the SAD diet, does promote inflammation. So fast food, processed foods, and high sugar foods and animal products. So those are the main four that make up the standard American diet or the westernized diet, all promote inflammation in various ways. So what we're going to talk about today is what types of foods and dietary changes can we make to decrease that. So here's some signs and some symptoms of having chronic inflammation within your body, some of which I'm sure you're well aware of, and others you may not be. So for example, having a large waist circumference is highly correlated with high levels of inflammation. And you typically see this more in the male population than female, where they tend to store a lot of their body fat in the abdomen. One of the reasons why that is so dangerous is because that fatty tissue tends to be congregated around the vital organs. So think heart, digestive tract, liver, pancreas, and that type of fat is really stubborn and difficult to get rid of. It also secretes lots of different hormones, which can further increase inflammation within the body. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Oh, sorry, I don't know what's going on. Let me go back. Ooh, sorry, give me 1 second because I don't want to make this worse than I already. Previous, here we go. I don't know if I hit something. I don't think I did. Sorry. Okay, so needless to say, we talked about blood glucose levels, and you'll see things like frequently tired. It's like, who's not, right? I'm always tired, different skin problems. I just wanted to point out to you how subtle some of these signs and symptoms can be. It's not necessarily something that just hits you in the face and you're like, oh, that must be the chronic inflammation I have. That a lot of these are underlying issues that many of us have on a daily basis, some of which are going to be nearly impossible to dissipate completely, but that we have to really think about, what else is going on when I'm feeling this way? And as you can see, Harvard Medical School and Harvard has some great information on inflammation. They've got great information on the gut microbiome. I actually used their website a lot today for this presentation. So I just kind of threw that quote down there at the bottom that, the best way to decrease inflammation is not necessarily through medications. A lot of Americans like to go straight to medications. It's through our diet. And I see the chat box is going up at a pretty high rate, so I want to make sure that I did not do something terrible. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. But anytime in class when I see the chat box going crazy, it's usually like, something's gone wrong. Okay. So I'm just going to stop for a second and see if there's any questions I need to answer at the moment. Okay, we're good. Now let me get this off of here. Impact on health. So how does inflammation affect our overall health? And when you glance at this slide, you can see that there's so many different conditions that have been directly tied to inflammation within the body. And I bet if we surveyed this entire group, we would be pressed to find anyone who hasn't been directly impacted, either themselves or through a direct or immediate family member who hasn't had one of these conditions. And I would also venture to say that we all have an invested interest in finding out what we can do to decrease our risk of being diagnosed with one of these conditions down the road. Now, you have to also consider that inflammation is just one aspect of being diagnosed with a chronic condition. And as much as I would love to say, oh, follow this dietary advice and you will never have any of these conditions, there's so many other factors that come into play. Genetics is one that we can't control, but we can offset some of the genes that we may have inherited through our diet and our lifestyle habits. So we're going to talk a little bit about what foods can we incorporate into our diet that might help us at least decrease our chances for being diagnosed with cancer or cardiovascular disease or an autoimmune condition. So what do we need to do in our diet specifically to decrease inflammation and also decrease our chances for developing a chronic disease? And I don't know if you can tell from the pictures up on the screen, because they are a little bit difficult, I thought, to decipher. You've got black beans, you've got cranberries or cherries. It honestly doesn't matter. They're both really great at decreasing inflammation. The bottom right corner, I was hoping was chocolate, and dark chocolate can be considered an antioxidant, but this one is actually seaweed. And so I don't know how many of you like sushi or like having the dried seaweed as a snack. I personally do not like seaweed at all. I do not like sushi, but I know a lot of people love it. So if you do, seaweed does have some anti-inflammatory properties. And then the bottom picture on your left is just to show you that mainly what we're talking about here is incorporating as many fresh fruits and vegetables with bright colors as much as we can in our diet. And most Americans are extremely deficient at getting high fiber and fresh fruits and vegetables into their diet. And there's a pretty significant percentage of Americans who actually can go throughout the day without eating any fresh fruits and vegetables. And part of that has to do with accessibility, but a really large part of that is that we've now become very accustomed to processed foods and fast foods because we live such a fast-paced lifestyle. We've gotten away from growing our own foods. We've gotten away from visiting farmers markets and cooking our own foods from scratch. And as we get away from those habits, we tend to incorporate a lot more foods that are high in sodium, high in fat, and high in chemicals and preservatives that not only will increase inflammation, but will also decrease the healthy bacteria that we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. So if you enjoy fresh fruits and vegetables, then this is great news for you, because there's really, I'd have to think hard about any fresh fruits and vegetables that aren't healthy. I mean, we could probably argue maybe like avocado or something like that, making it into guacamole. You know, it's a little bit high fat, high calorie, but you know, I love some guacamole, and you got to eat it with chips. So, okay, fine. But other than guacamole and avocado, which is a little bit high in fat, it tends to be the healthy fat, the monounsaturated fat. So even that is not necessarily an unhealthy choice. You just have to keep it in moderation so you don't take in too many calories. But other than that, you can see that leafy greens, fresh fruits, citrus fruits, berries are the most potent source of antioxidants. And you may have heard of a few different terms, and I didn't want to get too technical on this topic because then we'll run out of time for the next topic. But when you think about antioxidants and you think about how to decrease inflammation in the body, you may be thinking of something called phytochemicals, which are the pigments that are naturally occurring in fresh fruits and vegetables that give it its nice bright color. So if you see vegetables or fruits that are really colorful, like think of a bright red pepper or think of blueberries, that color is a type of phytochemical or pigment that has antioxidant properties, meaning it protects your body from oxidation. And in other words, that's a way of protecting you from inflammation. Nuts are another great option if you like almonds or walnuts, and even incorporating a little bit of olive oil on your salads or in cooking is a great way to incorporate omega-3 fatty acids, also found in cold water fish. And you probably have heard of omega-3. Gets a lot of press in the news and the media, and sometimes it's a little confusing to keep up with. It's one of those things like eggs or butter. It's like, is it good for me? Not good for me. And so what we know about omega-3 is that if you get it from your foods like oil or cold water fish, it can be great for heart health. Taking omega-3 in a supplement form is a little bit more controversial. And so I personally don't push supplementing omega-3. That being said, I have met people who take omega-3 supplements that have been prescribed by their doctor, and they have seen some really favorable results. I think it really depends on the person. I think it depends on the type of supplement, since there are so many out there. And it may also depend on the other medications that that person is taking. As you can see, we don't do very well in the category below. Fried foods, fast foods, refined carbs are a really difficult area for most Americans. And you can probably sit and think about your own, food intake. We just had the Super Bowl, we just had, holidays, and think about the types of foods and carbs that you tend to gravitate towards. And really, a lot of people would name off like fresh bread, crackers and cheese and things like that. And then very few people are like, oh, I'm always craving the skin of a baked potato. You know what I mean? It's like, we don't typically crave high fiber foods, and high fiber foods or high fiber carbs are the ones that are most healthy for us. And unfortunately, most of us tend to gravitate the other way towards the processed refined carbs. And that really takes away all the nutritious properties that carbohydrates can provide for us. All right, I'll stop for a second to see if there's any questions. Let's see. Oh, okay. Sorry, hypertension. Yes, sorry, I should have said that. I abbreviate sometimes the thinking, people that can read my mind. Okay. Now, I don't want to get too bogged down in the research because I know this can get boring and it can get a little bit crazy as far as the detail, but I just wanted to point out some areas of research that if you are super interested in this topic and you wanted to dig in a little bit deeper and learn more, these are just, this is just a small snippet of information that you can find. I mean, I could probably spend days, downloading research on the issue or on the topic. But you can see that beets, for example, and you can think about the color of beets. They're full of phytochemicals, and they will lower your inflammatory markers in the bloodstream. Beetroot juice you can buy at the store. Now, a lot of times it's pretty pricey because it's an extract, and anytime it's like I must say it's like a boutique food where it's like you get it at a specialty store like Fresh Market or something like that. So you don't need to have the beetroot juice, but you can eat fresh beets and you can boil them, steam them, you can slice them up on salads. You can even eat some canned beets. It's fine. Broccoli is another one. Again, think of it bright green. It's found to decrease mediators or markers that would promote inflammation. Broccoli offsets those. Black beans ferment within the gut and also have an anti-inflammatory response. And so we're going to talk about high fiber foods in more depth when we transition here in a minute to the gut microbiome. Chia seeds, you can sprinkle on cereal, you can put them in smoothies. They can help with those with type 2 diabetes. They're also a pretty good source of omega-3 fatty acids if you don't like fish. And flaxseed is another one that's not on there, but I could also say is pretty equal to chia seeds in terms of its nutritional value. And then of course, something like spinach, not only is an antioxidant, but it has vitamin E. And that's the great thing about a lot of these fresh fruits and vegetables is that they not only have this function for inflammation, they also are a super rich source of fiber, which is going to promote gut health. They also contain lots of vitamins and minerals, and they tend to make you feel pretty full, even though they're very low in calorie. So these foods tend to be something called nutrient dense, meaning they have density for nutrients, but not a lot of calories. Americans, on the other hand, tend to choose energy dense foods, high in calories, low in nutrients. And we're trying to kind of flip that on its head and do the complete opposite by really basing our diet off foods that are nutrient dense. So before we switch gears to the gut microbiome, which isn't going to be, like I said, a completely switching gears because they are so intertwined. Does anyone have any specific questions as it relates to foods that are high in antioxidants, phytochemicals, how to decrease inflammation within the body? One thing I did want to mention that is not on the slides is when you go to Walgreens or Walmart, you can find antioxidants or phytochemicals in the supplement aisle. For example, tomatoes are high in lycopene. That one gets a lot of press in the news. And you can buy lycopene pills and take them as a supplement. Polyphenols are another antioxidant found in plants. You can buy them in a supplement form. And as much as I would love to say, yeah, just go ahead and take your pills. You don't need to eat the tomatoes. You don't need to eat the plants. The research behind antioxidant supplements is pretty strong in that they don't work. So although there's some research with the gut microbiome that's still ongoing and a little bit unknown, it seems to be pretty clear that when you take these phytochemicals in a supplement form, they don't do anything. So you're not going to hurt yourself by taking them, but they're not going to give you nearly the benefit that you would get from the natural food source in itself. Okay. Oh yeah, intermittent fasting, pesticides. Okay, so we have two questions. Katie asked, do I think pesticides and chemicals used in foods impact the benefit of these foods? Yes. I say that slowly only because some of these foods are impacted more by pesticides and chemicals than others. So if you think of something like a banana that's heavily covered in its peel, I'm going to say not really. But if you think of something like blueberries or strawberries that have a large surface area that can interact with chemicals and pesticides, then yes, the likelihood that they are impacted, not only their nutrients, but the fact that you also might be ingesting some of those chemicals and pesticides on those berries would be much higher. So I tend to tell people, because this comes along with like the question of organic versus non-organic. So organic foods, a lot of people are confused what we mean by organic. And organic is just foods that are not made with chemicals or pesticides. And some people say, oh, I can't afford organic. And I totally agree. Like it can be outrageous in terms of price. And there's really no need to buy everything organic, but there are some fruits, and it's mainly fruits, to be honest, that tend to be really susceptible to chemicals and pesticides. Berries is one of them. And so typically we tell people to concentrate their efforts on fresh fruits that are more exposed. So yeah, unfortunately, I do think there's an impact. How much, I really don't know. But I would say if you can, at least for certain foods that have a higher susceptibility, then buy organic. And Rebecca asked, do you feel that intermittent fasting helps with inflammation? Yes. So funny enough, as a dietitian, we're always trained to not promote, fad diets. So you have someone doing the Atkins diet and someone doing the keto diet. And, as dietitians, we tend to be pretty close-minded to all of that. So when at first the intermittent fasting diet came out, I thought, oh, here we go again. It's another fad diet, starvation diet, whatever it is. But if you're not familiar with intermittent fasting, it can be done in a variety of ways. Some people fast all day and then will eat the next day. Some people fast within a window of time. So say they only can eat from like noon until 6 p.m. They fast the rest of the day. There's different styles. Needless to say, it does have an impact on inflammation. And the reason is because during those hours that you're not eating, you're allowing your digestive tract to recuperate and rest. So those of us that like to snack all day, we're constantly feeding calories into our body, first of all. We're constantly making our digestive tract work, and we're constantly seeing a secretion of hormones that may or may not be beneficial to us. When we do intermittent fasting, we allow that process to take a break over several hours, which is something that a lot of us don't do enough of. And so I see a lot of research that shows intermittent fasting to be very beneficial if you do it properly. And you have to check with your doctor. There's some conditions where intermittent fasting would not be recommended. But if you're a healthy individual, you can definitely read more about it. And I would say that you'll find that the research is pretty strong in that area. Good questions. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward to the gut microbiome. So what we're going to be talking about is all the good bacteria that like to hang out within our digestive tract. And there's many different microbiomes that make up the human body. We're going to talk about the gut, but there's also a skin microbiome. There's a neurological microbiome. It's basically all the bacteria that live throughout our body, on our skin. And there's many more bacteria cells than there are actually human cells. I think they say that human cells are outnumbered by bacteria cells 10 to 1. So we have lots of different bacteria. And your first reaction might be like, oh, I thought bacteria was bad for you. And there are definitely some types that do cause us to get sick. But we're going to be focusing more or less on the good type. And humans have discovered for like 10,000 years ago that probiotics, which is another term for the good bacteria that live in our gut, can be replenished, meaning we can change the population of the good bacteria in our gut by diet. And so the ancient Egyptians actually have been shown, through documented history that they were making fermented milk. Now we kind of sell a similar product in our grocery stores called kefir. I don't know if you've ever tried it. I personally have not. I don't like milk. And I know for a fact I probably don't like fermented milk. And I don't like yogurt either. So for me, that would be like an area that I probably wouldn't love. But if you love yogurt and you love the flavor of fermented things, you probably would enjoy kefir, which is a fermented milk. So the gut microbiome is basically the name that we give to the population of healthy bacteria that are flourishing in our digestive tract. And we know that these microorganisms have an overall impact on many different aspects of health. And now as a dietitian, and I work specifically in an exercise science department, we actually don't teach a lot about gut microbiome. And so for me, kind of digging deeper, especially for purposes of this presentation, it was really shocking to see how many different areas of research are going on right now. And that's a great thing that we're still learning how our gut and how bacteria affects our health. The frustrating part is that because we are still learning, there's not a lot of definite answers out there at this time. We have an inkling for certain things being beneficial, but we don't know the exact blueprint that we should try to create in our gut. And I think over the next maybe 5 or 10 years, we'll probably start to really focus more on what types of bacteria we should try to be replenishing maybe more than some others. Oh, I did that thing again. Let me go back. I think my mouse is just extra touchy today. Okay, so to give you an idea of the gut microbiome and all the different facets that affect it, you can see that it is affected by all different areas of our lifestyle. And I don't know if you guys see this talk. Oh, that's my fault. Let me move this. This says talking. And I thought that I had no control over that, but I just realized I do. So let me slide that out of the way. Okay, there we go. So age, medications like antibiotics, probiotics, which we're going to spend just a few minutes talking about, your diet, how nourished you are. All of these things affect the health of your gut microbiome. Many of us have been put on antibiotics for things like strep throat, sinus infection, ear infection, and you may have noticed that you do develop some unwanted digestive issues like diarrhea, cramping, and your doctor may suggest, hey, you might want to incorporate some yogurt while you're on this antibiotic. The reason for that is because yogurt has probiotics in that will increase healthy bacteria and hopefully dissipate some of those unwanted symptoms. Like I said, we can't control our age. We can control some of these other factors. And so we're going to try to discuss diet and probiotics and see what we can learn about how we can increase the health of our own gut microbiome. Before we jump into that, there's one term that you want to be aware of, especially if you're interested in this topic and you start doing some reading up on it. Gut dysbiosis is basically our body having a decrease in these healthy bacteria. On the slide, you can see these different factors that will affect the decrease in gut bacteria. Antibiotics, just spoke about that, but sleep. Who would have thought that your sleep habits would have any effect whatsoever on the bacterial population in your intestine? To me, that seems very far removed from each other, yet research shows people who get more sleep have a more diverse population of good bacteria in their gut. Same for diet. Many studies, there's so many studies out there that look at high fiber diet versus low fiber diet. And they have found that high fiber intake, especially in other countries where they naturally take in lots of fiber, their population of good bacteria is leaps and bounds in front of ours in terms of the diversity and the number of bacterial cells that live in their digestive tract. And then of course, medications can interact with the numbers, pollution, stress. And again, it's hard to go through life without stress, and you do need medications for certain reasons, but these are all areas that can decrease the overall population of your healthy bacteria. Sorry, got cut off there at the top with all this Zoom stuff, but it says functions of gut bacteria. And so you can see that our microbiome is responsible for lots of different important functions within the body. The main one, or the one that it gets most attention for, is typically immunity, or its ability to fend us off from invading germs that come through our food sources. But you may not have been aware that it also has the functions such as synthesizing vitamins and amino acids, having some type of interaction with our brain, where we can have these bacteria secrete chemicals that interacts with our nervous system. So it's really interesting to see that all of these bacteria are so active in our metabolism and their ability to impact our health in so many different facets. And like I said, even for myself, you know, with my background and being a dietitian, there were some of these that were even new to me. I was like, wow, I really didn't know that bacteria would have such an impact in so many different corners of our overall health. Here is just a short list of many important roles that gut bacteria can play and how they can impact our overall health. Now, the first one to me makes the most sense because the gut or the microbiome that we're talking about is in the digestive tract. So I totally understand that, yes, having healthy bacteria and increasing the population of different strains of healthy bacteria would be beneficial. But like I said, when you start digging deeper into the research, you can find some of these other health effects that are also taking place that are really interesting. And I find people who suffer from digestive issues like Crohn's or IBS is really common, that they actually do well when they start incorporating higher fiber foods or foods that might change the overall population of their healthy bacteria in their gut. Now, this is a little bit more of a confusing slide, and I was tempted to not even put it on the presentation. But what I wanted to really have you take away from this confusing map is how interconnected our digestive is to the other organs within our body. And I think that really helps us understand why these bacteria are so important. So before talking about this topic, if someone asked you, what is the most important function, or what is the main function of healthy bacteria in your gut, you might have thought, just like the rest of us, that, oh, healthy bacteria just keeps you regular, or it fends off constipation, or it keeps you healthy from getting like the stomach bug or something like that. But I bet most of us would never have known how many different interactions our gut has with our brain and the other organs that are connected to our digestive tract. So for example, you've got the microbiota, that's just another term for the population of healthy bacteria that can permeate through the intestinal wall, and they can interact or make something called a lipopolysaccharide, which is like a fatty acid that can interact with inflammation signals. And, following these different paths, you can see that some of them go straight up to the brain, and the brain can interact with the digestive tract. So you can see why there's so many different areas of research going on right now. And you could spend weeks and days just kind of digging through the various ways that this healthy bacteria can benefit us, whether it's through the neurosystem or other parts of the digestive tract. One really strong area is obesity, by the way, and you can see it down there at the bottom in red. There is a lot of strong research that shows that people with obesity have a much different population of gut bacteria than people who aren't obese. And so they're trying to figure out what the exact connection is between these differences. So that may lead down the road to some type of treatment for people who do struggle with their weight, maybe just by changing the overall population or diversity of the bacteria could help them manage their weight a bit easier. When we talk about various foods, see if I can move this over here, or ways to increase our bacteria, you probably have heard of prebiotics, probiotics, or fermented foods. And a lot of times there's confusion between prebiotics and probiotics. So probiotics are when you're actually consuming the bacteria. Think of yogurt. Yogurt contains acidophilus. That is the bacteria that you are consuming. That is a probiotic. Prebiotic is not the bacteria. A prebiotic is the food that the bacteria like to eat. So that is what we call a substrate. Bacteria love fiber. They love resistant starches. Think gums and pectins and high fiber foods, fruits. That's what they feed on. And so prebiotics are when you incorporate those type of substrates into your food or into your probiotics supplement. And then you've got symbiotics, which is when you have a mixture of both. So down there in the screen, you can see a supplement type that you can buy at the store, and it contains both the probiotic, which is some active bacteria, along with a substrate. That is what the bacteria likes to feed upon. And then, of course, you can buy fermented foods or make your own fermented foods. Bacteria love fermented foods. They feed off that. They actually ferment foods on their own. And so anything that's already fermented is going to promote an increase in healthy bacteria in the gut. So something like kefir, like I said, which is a fermented milk product. You've got sauerkraut, you've got kombucha, you've got kimchi, which is a fermented cabbage. Any of those foods that are fermented tend to really increase the population of healthy bacteria. Again, kind of a busy slide, nothing to get too overly concerned about here, but just wanted to point out some of the most common strains of probiotics that you'll typically see on the market today. And so something like bacillus, typically abbreviated with a B, or you'll have lactoacidophilus. And those are some of the most common probiotics that are on the market today. Now, just because you read these strains on a product does not mean they're effective. And we're going to talk in a second just about what we need to look for when choosing a probiotic that's actually going to work and not be kind of throwing your money away. You can see the formulation is sometimes naturally found in yogurt or in a tablet form or a drink, and there's various different brands. And to be honest, the research, although it's strong for many of the different types of strains listed on this slide, there's not an overall consensus for really any one particular strain yet on certain health outcomes. So you can see there are some claims that can be allowed, but because supplements, especially probiotic type supplements or dietary supplements, are not really regulated by the FDA, they can get away with a little bit more in terms of claims. And you just want to be careful that you don't invest too much into something that hasn't been entirely proven yet. So research may be pointing in that direction, but it may not be conclusive yet. And that seems to be the case with a lot of different probiotics. And you'll notice the claims sometimes are very vague. So for example, supports digestive health. It's like, what exactly does that mean? And, who knows? So that's what I'm saying. You just have to be careful, and that you can incorporate some of these products into your lifestyle, but don't expect them to be a cure-all for every little thing, because there's so much research that still needs to be learned and discovered. So how do we choose a probiotic? Because it can be entirely confusing when you're walking through the grocery store or the drugstore shelves and you see one bottle after the next, or you see them listed on Amazon. And it's just like, whoa, which one do I choose? Do I choose the one with the pretty packaging? Do I choose the one that says this strain or that strain? And so there are some general guidelines, again, keeping in mind that this is a dietary supplement. Dietary supplements do not go through the same stringent guidelines or regulations that our food products do. So just because something is on a label doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And you do have to do a little bit of your own legwork to make sure that you're buying something that's going to be worth your money. So something to look for brand is going to be the NSF international label, meaning that it's gone through its own third-party testing. Sometimes it'll actually say it has a USDA third-party testing done on it. Another one it'll say is like CGMP, which is like the current good manufacturing practice. There's some lingo out there that's a little bit of a key that yes, this product has gone through some additional third-party objective testing that you can be a little bit more likely to feel good about the product. Some examples of those brands are listed there, and you probably have seen those on the shelves in the grocery store. Probiotic strains, so they're not all the same in terms of the types of bacteria that they contain. So bifidobacteria is abbreviated B most of the time. Lactobacillus is extremely common. Usually it'll just say L dot something. So for example, Lactobacillus acidophilus is L dot acidophilus. And those are two of the most common that you'll see on probiotic products. That being said, that doesn't necessarily mean those are the ones you need. So that's where it's very sticky, is we don't know if every human needs the same type of probiotics. Just because they're common and they're in the probiotic supplements doesn't necessarily mean that we all need to take the same ones. And so that's where, we're still learning. The intended use, and again, this kind of is in the same category. We don't know. We can't match up yet. Okay, you have this digestive problem, you need this strain. You have this health problem, you need to incorporate this strain. You're trying to lose weight, you need to incorporate this strain. We see research kind of moving in certain directions, but we don't have enough conclusive evidence to have the exact plan for every single chronic health condition. But there is promise that we'll end up learning a lot of information regarding matching up strains with specific chronic conditions. The most important off this list, I would have to say, is the CFUs. So that's the colony forming units, or in other words, the ability for the probiotic to flourish and to have enough active bacteria to make an impact on your digestive health. You need to see at least 1 million CFUs listed on the label, usually abbreviated as 10 to the 6th power. Sometimes it'll say even more than that, which is fine. Anything less than that is typically not enough of an impact. It doesn't have a high enough potency to deliver any sort of impact on your digestive tract. So pay attention to the CFUs. And second most important is the storage requirements. Most, not all, but most probiotics do require refrigeration and have to be stored at a specific temperature, or they don't live and make it to your front door still active. And so there have been studies that have pulled different samples of probiotics and found that somewhere between 20% and 90% of the probiotics that get delivered to somebody's house or get delivered to our supermarket shelves are no longer active, meaning you're just throwing your money out the window. So you want to make sure that whoever you order from your probiotics from, or wherever you get them from, that they've been stored at the appropriate temperature, or it's not going to have any impact on your digestive health. Just to kind of summarize what we know to this point regarding the research behind our gut microbiome and probiotics, we know that they're beneficial. It's just difficult right now to pinpoint who they benefit and how much. So we know overall taking in a probiotic or incorporating prebiotics and probiotics into your daily routine is a good thing. And you're really not going to hurt yourself by doing that. It's just a matter of knowing, okay, is this probiotic going to affect me the same way it would affect you? We know that microbes that live in our gut impact a variety of health conditions, probably many more than we ever imagined. And again, some of these interactions between our microbes and how they influence our health are still a mystery. We see that there's some patterns between microbes and obesity, but I don't think it's been discovered yet as to what that connection is. So that's what is still being discovered, is what is this connection? Why do these people who have who are obese have this type of gut population and these people don't? Maybe it's genetics, maybe it's the diet, maybe it's a variety of factors. We don't know. We do know that dietary fiber directly influences our gut population. So if there's one takeaway point from the entire presentation, you should be incorporating as much fiber as you can into your diet. Americans tend to consume about half or not even half of the amount of fiber that's recommended per day. And so I would venture to say that in this group, we probably are following suit, that many of us are not getting enough fiber. And if there's one easy thing that you can do that's not expensive, is to just incorporate more fresh fruits and vegetables. We know that the gut microbiome is directly affected by our standard American diet. Processed foods, chemicals, preservatives all decrease the population of healthy bacteria. We see that directly in research, and we know that as a fact that the more processed foods that we consume, the less healthy our gut population is. And I mentioned previous that strong connection between the gut microbiome, the type of strains that reside in our gut, and our risk of developing obesity. At the same time, there's many things we're still discovering, which can be a little bit frustrating, especially for people who are really, wanting to make some changes and, do everything they can to better their health. We don't know yet if natural probiotics, say found in yogurt, are better than taking it by supplement form. We haven't really proven it one way or the other. Now, if I had to guess, that what we'll find out is that getting it in a food is likely better, but we just don't know yet. We don't know if microbes have any influence at all on our appetite, and why I might prefer certain foods and somebody else might prefer foods completely different than I do. There might be some kind of signaling system between our gut and the microbes in our brain that create this type of preference over certain types of foods. We don't know the exact effect of pesticides. Somebody asked us earlier, but we do know that pesticides, chemicals, and preservatives do likely decrease the population. We don't know exactly by how much. We don't have the answers yet as to how they affect each individual strain, but it's best to think that we should try to avoid pesticides on our food as much as possible. Let's see. Oh, organic food. I think somebody asked this as well, or that kind of goes along with the pesticides. We don't know 100% if all organic food is going to positively affect our gut microbiota. Like I mentioned earlier, that certain foods definitely would be beneficial to get organic. I keep using the strawberries, but I think strawberries are like the #1 fruit that has the most chemicals or pesticides on it, which is why I keep kind of throwing that one out there. But there's other fruits that are similar to strawberries that tend to have very high chemical levels versus other foods that really don't have a lot of chemicals on the skin that we eat. And so it's probably not as big of a deal. We know there's so many interactions between the bacteria that live in our gut and what they do for our health, but we're still trying to discover what exactly they're doing. It's like they're communicating, they're metabolizing, they're helping us break down different compounds. They might be interacting with our inflammatory system. They have a direct impact on our immunity. I mean, there's just so many different ways we can go with this, and we don't know exactly how this all takes place. It's still being learned. Some areas of research in gut microbiome are more learned right now than others, but it's definitely an area that's growing. And like I said, over the next 5+ years, I think we're going to know a lot more than we do now. Okay. Let me go ahead and take a brief second here and back up to some of these questions. Oh, kombucha, that's a good question. So kombucha, for those of you that aren't familiar, is like a fermented beverage, almost like a fermented tea. And it's controversial, to be honest, Karen. It's on my slide. I think that it's I don't know if I put it on there or not, or maybe it's just in my head. But anyway, kombucha is definitely one that gets a lot of attention, and people love to promote it as like healthy. Some people say it cures all different types of health ailments. But from my research, it's inconclusive. And actually, a lot of the research said it can be actually detrimental just because it doesn't necessarily have the same active cultures that say something like kefir, which is a fermented dairy product, would. So they said to be a little bit careful about kombucha. It's very acidic. Sometimes it can contain some harmful, like I think sometimes it's made out of mushrooms. Like sometimes it could be a little bit harmful and harsh to people's digestive tracts, and they overdo it with the kombucha. So of all the fermented foods out there, I wouldn't say it's the most effective way to increase the healthy bacteria in your gut. Probiotic supplement, yeah, I definitely think it's worth trying, Rebecca. Normally, I'm not a huge supplement person. I say always try to get your nutrients from your food. We're kind of trained to say that as dietitians for the most part. But when you think about probiotics and you look at the research that's out there, you do tend to see some promising results, especially if you follow the guidelines about making sure that the probiotics are stored in the proper temperature. They also can be affected by light, humidity. So as long as you're getting a supplement that's high quality and it's active, then I think you would notice some positive effects to your digestive tract, if not other areas of your overall health. How do you get fiber for someone with diabetes and chronic kidney dysfunction disease? I'm assuming CKD. So for fiber, yeah, so that is definitely a little bit trickier when you're looking at other coexisting conditions. Now, normally what we've seen with people with diabetes, as long as they keep their portions within normal limits, fiber actually can help decrease how the sugar releases into the bloodstream, because fiber is not digested, or it's hard for our body to digest. So anytime we eat anything with fiber, it tends to slow down that digestive tract. So typically, and again, everybody's different, foods with fiber, as long as you're keeping it within reason, would be beneficial to somebody with diabetes. In terms of chronic kidney disease, there's going to be other things that come into play in terms of electrolyte imbalances, protein intake. But again, I think if you find whole grain carbohydrates, or you consume fruits and vegetables that are safe for people with kidney disease and aren't too high in certain minerals, then you should be able to. It probably also will depend upon your taste preferences, but you're right. Adding those types of conditions can really complicate things a little bit, and that person that may have those coexisting conditions would benefit from a more individualized plan than maybe people who don't have those things to worry about. Sorry, I just hit something on that mouse again. Let's see. I have read that exercise can change the microbiome beneficially. Yes, so you probably have all heard of the term exercise is medicine. And a lot like our gut that has so many different ways of impacting our health, exercise does the same. And I'm not just saying that because I work in an exercise science department, but for those of you in this webinar, think about the times that you personally have exercised. How do you feel when you're done? And I know sometimes it's a drag when you're tired and you don't want to go work out, but then when you're finished, if you have that natural high, that ability for your body to really benefit from that extra oxygen you've taken in, you've kind of gotten your brain moving in the right direction. And a lot of that is the same on your gut. You get things moving in the right direction for one. Two, you kind of decrease the overall inflammation in your body when you exercise. And the same thing happens to your gut microbiome. So yes, there's definitely a positive connection between those two. Does age? Yeah, so as we age, our gut microbiome typically will decrease in overall numbers and overall diversity of strains that exist. Now, that being said, when you're born, we have a very immature microbiome, not a lot of diversity, not a lot in terms of population numbers, but it grows rather quickly. Now, what the gut microbiome becomes depends on many factors. The diet you're fed, it all the way comes down to whether you're born via C-section or not, the type of bacteria that are in your gut when you're born. I mean, there's so many different factors. But as we age into adulthood and beyond, those numbers do tend to go down. And that also makes us more susceptible to different types of illnesses. So as we age, it becomes even more important to kind of, read and find out more about how we can support the health of our gut microbiome. Oh, leaky gut. Leaky gut is basically when the permeability of our intestine is not effective or as much as it should be. So in other words, substances are leaking in and out of our gut. Now, our gut is always a little bit leaky. I mean, it's not a perfect system, but inflammation, age, health conditions can all increase the permeability, which means things are leaking in and out of our gut that shouldn't be. And that can include bad microbes. It can include other hormones that shouldn't be kind of going in and out, or different types of substances that can increase inflammation. And having a low population of healthy bacteria can increase the likelihood of leaky gut. Obesity increases leaky gut. Inflammation, all of these chronic conditions increase leaky gut. Is apple cider vinegar beneficial to the gut? That's controversial, and I love some apple cider vinegar. I could drink that stuff, but it's not as direct a relationship as I wish it were. But it's definitely considered a healthy food, and it's good to use on salads and things like that. But it is acidic. It can actually cause irritation to your esophagus and some of your intestinal lining if you have too much of it. So I would say keep it in moderation. It's not really known as a super fermented food or one of those prebiotics or anything like that. But any type of vinegar does still support fermentation. So I would say in moderation, it's definitely something that I would recommend. It's just not something that I'm going to push as the main overall health food to go after at this point. And you'll actually see supplements that are little apple cider vinegar pills. Again, a little controversial. Don't think those pills are doing much for anybody. Not going to hurt anything either, but probably a waste of money. What is the relationship between the gut microbiome and IBS? So IBS is probably one of the most common digestive conditions of our overall population because it is so tricky to diagnose. A lot of people don't realize that's what they have. And there's so many different causes: stress, diet, age, hormones, genetics, you name it. So the healthier your gut microbiome, the less likely you are to suffer from IBS. Now, that being said, I'm sure there's people that know either themselves or other people who do everything in their power to dissipate their IBS symptoms from, following the high fiber guidelines, to eating fresh fruits and vegetables, drinking plenty of water, and they still suffer. And that's just like anything. We can't control all the factors, but you will find that putting some emphasis on promoting a healthy gut will definitely more than likely benefit those with IBS in a positive fashion. Okay, thank you. Let's see, is it dairy intolerance indicative of microbiome? No, dairy intolerance is not necessarily indicative of a microbiome issue. Some people genetically are just born without that enzyme to break down dairy. And so honestly, the gut microbiome won't really change their ability to do that if that's the case. Now, for others, we lose that ability as we age to break down dairy. And so, yes, in that particular case, if it's something that's more subtle and not something that's genetically inherited, then the gut microbiome would help us break down dairy, and help us tolerate dairy as we age. So it kind of depends on the severity and the overall cause of the dairy intolerance. Another thing to keep in mind is that some of the probiotics actually have lactose in them as the substrate in the probiotic pill. So someone with dairy intolerance probably wouldn't do very well on those particular probiotic supplements. Super beet gummies. Huh. Michael, that's a new one for me. I've seen beet juice. I've not seen the beet gummies. I don't know, Michael. I want to say they're probably not that effective since they've been processed into the gummy form. Is it truly, is there truly a way to pull what we need from a beet and put it into a chew or put it into a gummy? Typically, no. But that's something I'll have to investigate just a little bit further. My best guess, to be honest, with that, we'd have to extract it as a juice would be more effective, or eating it as a whole food would be more effective. But I could be wrong. So it's definitely worth looking into. And if anything, it's not going to hurt you. Let's see. Is it possible to take too much of a probiotic? Elizabeth, I'm going to guess yes. It's possible to have too much of a good thing. It's going to be unlikely because there's so many trillions of bacteria cells living in our gut that the amount of a probiotic you would have to personally take to really offset that would be such a large amount that I'm not sure it would be entirely possible. It's almost like that question where someone asks, can you drink too much water? It's like, yes, but it's very difficult to do so. So I don't think it's anything you need to worry about, but I'm sure it's possible. It's just not likely. Okay, so if you follow what the supplement says on the instructions, or you're getting a probiotic through your food sources, you'll be completely fine. Same goes for fiber. A lot of people will ask, can you get too much fiber? Yes, you can, and it can cause gastro upset, and you can also have some other issues that go along with that, but it's not likely, and you have to really try to go overboard on the fiber. Let's see. I think I got to most of the questions, and if not, I'm going to go ahead and type my email in. If I missed your question, or if you think of something at a later date, Michael, I can always circle back with you too regarding the beet gummies. Sorry, that's not one I'm as familiar with. And you can touch base with me, tomorrow. Here's my email, and you're more than welcome to email me. And Margaret and Caitlin can certainly share the presentation if you need to refer back to it for any reason.
Awesome. That's what I was going to say, just because I think we've had quite a few questions about that. Yes, we recorded this. It will be on our website. And so you can share it and view it. And Tracy, I have your slides, so I can put those on there as well for everybody to view. So you guys will be getting a certificate of attendance in the email, in an email form, and then you'll have the recording on there as well. So lots of ways to get the information. I'm also going to throw into the chat. I just realized I was muted.
You weren't, and then you were for a second, and then you weren't again.
Okay. Whoops. Okay. I'm going to throw into the chat. This is where you can look at our upcoming webinars. They'll be on our website. I don't know what all you heard, but yes, this was recorded. It will be online. All of Tracy's slides will be online. And she put her email in there. So thank you guys so much for being here today. Thanks for all the questions. And Tracy, thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming.
anytime. And like I said, feel free to reach out if you think of any other questions, or if I missed anybody, I apologize.
Awesome. All right.
Wonderful,
Thank you, everybody.
Tracy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay.